Welcome back to Under Baobab Skies. Settle in, let the fire crackle, and listen closely. Tonight, we journey back in time, not just to a place, but to a people. We're going to the heart of southern Africa, to the city of stone, Great Zimbabwe. Its walls have stood for centuries against the relentless sun and the whispering winds, holding stories within their very structure. Tonight, we aren't just looking at ruins. We're listening to the echoes of the hands that shaped them, feeling the sweat that cemented their place, and hearing the rhythm of life that once pulsed in their mighty shadow. Imagine this with me. You're standing at the edge of the vast savanna. The sun hangs low and golden, painting the endless horizon in shades of orange and red. Before you, a silhouette rises against the fading, light-towering stone walls, each rock fitting so precisely with the next, it's as if nature itself had guided them into place. The air is warm, carrying the scent of dry grass and ancient dust. And if you listen carefully, you might just hear the faint, distant echo of drums rolling over the hills. This is Great Zimbabwe, a monumental meeting point of human ingenuity and the patient, enduring strength of the earth. Let's pause here for a moment. The fire crackles softly, and the stars begin to claim the sky above our bow. This story isn't just about the magnificent walls of stone, but about the people, the architects, the carriers, the stonemasons whose names have been nearly lost to history. Think about it. Each stone, heavy and unyielding, was a message sent to the future, a testament to skill, patience, and a powerful sense of community. Each wall stands as a silent monument to their incredible effort. Life for a great Zimbabwe stonemason was anything but easy. It was a life of immense physical labor, demanding a strength that's hard for us to even imagine. It required a precision that could not falter, a discipline that was almost a ritual. Yet, within this grueling work, there was a profound beauty. Can you picture the rhythm of it? The lifting, the placing, the careful adjusting each motion, a dance, a display of human will against the stubborn permanence of rock. As we drift through this story tonight, let's try to feel the slow, deliberate heartbeat of their world. A pulse that has carried through centuries to reach us right here, right now. The day begins early. The first rays of a soft, golden sun creep over the horizon, illuminating the grand stone walls and the scattered boulders around them. In the distance, a few local villagers begin their day. The stones themselves seem to hold the memory of these mornings. They remember the first mason who knelt down, tracing the foundation lines with charcoal and string. They remember him whispering encouragement to his young apprentices, teaching them the secrets of the craft. He would work until the sun dipped low and the sky turned the color of copper, only then allowing himself to rest. The stones also remember the sounds of life. The laughter of young men as they carried heavy stones across the uneven ground, their muscles straining. The soft, rhythmic songs they hummed to pass the time and lighten the load. And yes, the stones even remember the silent frustration when a particular rock refused to fit, when the design seemed impossible. This is a story of both immense toil and incredible triumph, of human hands leaving an indelible mark on the landscape. As we continue our journey tonight, let your mind wander slowly into the past. Imagine the air, thick with fine stone dust that catches the sunlight. Feel the heat of the African sun pressing down, a constant companion. A sudden gust of wind sweeps through, scattering loose sand like tiny, fleeting whispers against the rising walls. Now, focus on the hands scarred and calloused, yet impossibly skilled. These hands are shaping an edifice that will speak to generations they will never meet. They are not just building a city, they are building a legacy. And in that quiet moment of imagination, perhaps you can feel it to the gentle, rhythmic pulse of history, breathing just beneath the surface. It's a story of a people connected to their land, to each other, and to the future. A story told not in words, but in stone. It's a story that lives on, here, under the baobab sky. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you enjoy this story and others, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more videos. You are now under baobab skies. The story begins now. Welcome back to our journey into the heart of Great Zimbabwe. In our last segment, we touched upon the marvel of this ancient city, a testament to human ingenuity. But tonight, as the fire crackles and the stars emerge, we're going to go deeper. We're going to feel the weight of the very stones that built this empire. By the end of this part, you'll understand the immense physical and emotional demands placed on the builders, how their survival, their skill, and their spirit were tested daily by the granite itself. So, settle in and let's travel back in time. Imagine the first light of dawn breaking over the Zimbabwean savanna, painting the sky in hues of gold and amber. Before the sun even crested the horizon, the work began. The first and most relentless burden for a stonemason was the sheer weight of the stones. These weren't small, manageable bricks. They were massive granite boulders, quarried from the surrounding hills. Each one had to be transported over uneven, treacherous ground, lifted with immense effort and fitted with a precision that borders on the unbelievable. Think about that for a moment. There was no mortar, no modern adhesive to bind these stones together. The entire stability of the structure relied on a perfect, interlocking fit. Each stone had to nestle against its neighbors so flawlessly that the resulting walls could withstand centuries of wind, rain, and the slow, grinding erosion of time. The labor was grueling, stretching from the cool pre-dawn hours through the scorching midday heat until the sun finally dipped below the western hills, leaving the sky bruised with purple and orange. This was not just a job. It was a daily battle against gravity and exhaustion. The stones themselves were unforgiving teachers. A single misfit stone, one that was just a fraction off in its angle or size, could halt all progress for hours. Picture an apprentice, muscles trembling, forehead slick with sweat, standing under the watchful, intense gaze of a master mason. The elders, with decades of experience etched into their hands and faces, would correct alignments and angles with sharp, precise commands. Every mason had to carry a dual burden: the raw physical strain of lifting and moving tons of rock, and the intense mental focus required to achieve absolute perfection with every placement. Precision wasn't just a matter of pride, it was a matter of survival. One poorly placed stone could compromise the integrity of an entire wall, bringing it crashing down and undoing months of labor. Beyond the physical challenge of the stones, there was the immense pressure of time. Great Zimbabwe wasn't just a collection of impressive walls. It was the bustling heart of a kingdom, a cultural and spiritual center, and a powerful symbol of authority for the kings who commissioned its construction. The work had to continue, relentless and unceasing, through all seasons. The wet season brought its own challenges, threatening to soften the ground beneath their feet and make the heavy stones even more difficult to maneuver. The dry season was no kinder, cracking the earth and sending dust into their eyes and lungs. Deadlines were ever present, though not written on paper contracts as we know them today. They were dictated by the expectations of the royal court, the cyclical rhythms of agricultural life, and the vital flow of trade that sustained the city. The Masons understood that failing to meet these expectations would bring not just personal failure, but disgrace upon their entire community, their families, their apprentices, and their lineage. The weight of royal ambition rested squarely on their shoulders, adding another layer of pressure to their already monumental task. And then there was the environment itself, a constant adversary. The midday sun was a brutal force, scorching their backs and sapping their strength. Fierce winds would whip fine sand and dust across the construction site, getting into their eyes, noses, and throats, making every breath a gritty effort. When the sun set, the temperature could drop suddenly, and the masons would huddle near small fires, their muscles aching and stiff from the day's toil. Illnesses like malaria, along with exhaustion and the constant risk of injury, crushed finger, a twisted ankle, were ever-present companions. The mental fortitude required to simply wake up each morning, face those silent, imposing boulders, and begin the struggle anew was immense. It was a test of will as much as a test of strength. Within this demanding world, a strict social hierarchy governed the workforce. Master masons, the keepers of ancient knowledge, commanded absolute respect and obedience. Apprentices learned far more than just technique. They learned the unspoken language of authority, the subtle art of knowing when to speak and when to remain silent, when to ask a question and when to simply observe and absorb. Mistakes were corrected sharply and publicly. In this high-stakes environment, there was little room for error. The responsibility was communal. A single mason's carelessness could endanger the work of dozens, compromise the stability of a wall that was meant to last for eternity, or tarnish the reputation of the entire city. The weight of this shared responsibility was as heavy as any stone they lifted. Yet, amidst all this hardship, a rhythm emerged. Stone after stone, lift after lift, the masons developed a cadence, a silent, coordinated dance between human strength and the stubborn resistance of granite. This rhythm was often given voice. Songs and chants would rise from the work site, their melodies echoing across the stony expanse. These weren't just tunes to pass the time. They were functional. They synchronized the immense effort of lifting a particularly heavy boulder. They kept spirits high in the face of exhaustion, and they helped measure the pace of the work. These songs were living archives, carrying memory and instruction within their verses. They passed down ancestral blessings, practical techniques, and warnings of dangers. The work, through this rhythm and song, became a form of moving meditation. The sweat that poured from their bodies became an offering. The very act of creation, of raising these magnificent walls from the earth, was as much a spiritual practice as it was a practical one. They were not just building a city. They were building a connection to their ancestors and their gods. Even their tools, which seem so simple to our modern eyes, demanded incredible skill. Wooden levers for leverage, stone hammers for shaping, and chisels made of iron or bone all required mastery. A misplaced strike with a hammer could fracture a precious, carefully quarried stone, wasting hours, or even days, of hard labor. Apprentices had to learn not just how to wield these implements, but how to feel the stone's natural grain, to read its internal structure, to anticipate its reactions, and to respect its silent, powerful resistance. In this way, the granite, though inanimate, became another teacher. Those who learned to listen carefully to the stone survived and thrived. Those who didn't found themselves facing constant frustration and sometimes serious injury. Every stone was a lesson waiting to be learned. Let's just pause here for a moment. The fire crackles softly, and we can almost feel ourselves resting beneath the vast African sky. Imagine the cool evening air on sunburnt skin, the earthy scent of dust mingling with the smoke from countless small fires. Hear the quiet murmurs of the masons as they reflect on the day's labor, their voices low and tired, but filled with a deep sense of accomplishment. In this quiet moment, the great stones hold still, patient and eternal, guardians of 1,000 stories. And as we sit here, we can feel the weight and the rhythm of their history, pressing gently on our minds, connecting us to the hands that built eternity. The sun over Great Zimbabwe was not a friend. It rose each morning like a slow-burning drum of fire, beating against the backs of men who had already been awake since the first light touched the granite hills. Their shoulders gleamed with dust and sweat. The stones they carried grew hotter with each passing hour, until even the air itself seemed to shimmer in protest. For the masons and haulers who built this city of stone, heat was not merely discomfort, it was a silent enemy that could kill. The dry season brought days where even the birds hid beneath acacia shade, their calls silenced. Granite, once cool and forgiving at dawn, turned cruel by noon. Those who handled it bare-handed learned quickly that the sun could scald as surely as a flame. The very ground they walked on became a griddle. They fought the heat with rhythm. Each swing of the hammer, each push of a massive block, followed the steady, practiced pattern of their breath. They learned to listen to their own bodies, to stop when the pulse grew too loud in their ears, to drink before the tongue stuck to the roof of the mouth. But water was never easy to come by. The nearest stream lay a good walk away, and precious clay jars had to be carried with immense care to avoid spilling a single drop of the cool gift inside. So they invented their own wisdom. Some mixed ash with river clay to make thick, porous jars that, when buried in damp sand, stayed cold through the afternoon. Others dropped bits of crushed herbs into the water-wild mint, the bitter bark of the mopane tree, believing it gave strength to the heart and cooled the blood. When a man fainted, struck down by the sun, his companions would fan him with woven reeds, sprinkle cool sand on his chest, and whisper the name of a river spirit said to bring rain. Science and faith lived side by side, partners in survival beneath that unforgiving sun. Injuries were constant companions. A slipped stone could crush a foot. A sharp shard of granite could split a palm open to the bone. Cuts filled with dust and swelled, turning an angry crimson in the harsh light. But no one stopped for long. They would rinse wounds with salt water, a painful but effective cleanser. Then rub in a thick poultice of fat, and crushed leaves a remedy older than memory itself. The healers who lived among them were respected like priests. Women from nearby villages came at dusk, carrying bundles of herbs tied in grass string, the soothing gel of aloe for burns, snake bean pods to break a fever, and the tiny blue flower that, when chewed, numbed pain and brought a moment of relief. Some builders tied charms around their wrists, small, hand-stitched pouches of bone fragments or iron dust. These were said to confuse the evil spirits that wandered near the walls, spirits that delighted in misfortune. For them, an accident was not just an accident. It was a malevolent presence you could almost smell in the wind. When accidents happened too often in one section, the foreman would call a pause. The workers would gather and hum a low, resonant tune, half prayer, half apology to the ancestors for disturbing their rest beneath the hill. But the greatest danger, the most insidious threat, was exhaustion. Not the sudden, dramatic collapse that everyone sees, but the slow, creeping unraveling that comes after weeks under the sun. You could spot it in a man's eyes, the dull glaze, the slow stumble on even ground, the hands that trembled when he tried to lift a stone he had lifted 100 times before. When that happened, the elders would step in, their authority unquestioned. They would insist he rest beneath the deep shade of a fig tree, a silent, leafy guardian. They would bring him a calabash of fermented sorghum, not to intoxicate, but to replenish his spirit, to feed his strength. Still, pride was a stubborn thing. Many refused to rest. In a world where strength meant survival, to stop was to be seen as weak, and weakness was feared more than the sun. So the elders, wise in the ways of men, invented a trick. They would pretend to bless the tools with sacred smoke from smoldering herbs, a ritual that required everyone to stop and wait. In truth, it was a clever ruse, a forced moment for everyone to breathe, to wipe the sweat from their faces, to drink, and most importantly, to laugh. That laughter was medicine. It healed what herbs and remedies could not. Men told jokes about mischievous spirits who swapped stones at night, forcing them to rebuild the same wall twice. Others swore that the heat itself was a liver giant, invisible beast sitting upon the valley, its breath so heavy that no man could outrun it. They mocked this beast with songs, beating rhythm on their hammers like drums, turning their collective pain into defiant poetry. Food was another shield against the sun. Midday meals were small but sacred affairs. Ground millet mixed with dried meat, and once a week a treat of roasted maize sweetened with wild honey. These meals were often eaten in silence. The act of chewing was slow, reverent, as though every single bite carried the memory of survival. The workers believed that the walls absorbed their strength, that every strained muscle, every drop of sweat, left an invisible imprint on the stones. In that way, the city became a living body, its bones of granite, its blood of sweat. The bonds formed in those moments of shared hardship ran deeper than the foundations of the walls themselves. Brotherhood was not declared with words. It was built, stone by stone. When a man fell sick, his companions carried his load without complaint until he healed. When one died, the others would find a smooth, white quartz stone and place it carefully into the wall in his memory. They said the spirits could see the bright color from afar and would know that the man, their brother, still stood among them. By twilight, the air finally softened. Long shadows stretched across the valley like a sigh of relief, and the first cool breeze touched their faces like mercy. This was the hour of stories. The younger men would gather round the elders, who leaned on their heavy chisels like walking sticks and spoke of the world beyond the hills, of great rivers where fish leaped like silver, of powerful queens who sang to the moon, of bustling markets filled with gold, ivory, and salt. These stories kept them human. They were a vital reminder that life existed beyond the endless cycle of dust, sweat, and stone. Some tales were warnings of arrogant masons who angered the spirits and found their meticulously built walls crumbled overnight. Others were dreams of cities yet to be built, where their children and their children's children would dance on smooth stone courtyards and call them by name, the Founding Fathers. In those moments, the very walls around them seemed to breathe. The stones caught the last light of sunset and glowed faintly, as if listening, absorbing the hopes and fears of their creators. When night finally settled, the air cooled enough for deep, restorative rest. Men lay on red mats near their tools, their bodies sore but their spirits quiet. Some whispered short prayers, asking that tomorrow's sun be just a little gentler. Others traced lines in the sand plans for the next day's wall, complex curves and angles drawn with calloused fingers. In the quiet dark, work and dream became one. The heat might have ruled the day, but the night belonged to them. Crickets hummed a steady chorus, owls called from the rocky kopje, and in the darkness, the men felt both small and eternal part of something vast and stonebound that would outlive them all. They slept with the quiet confidence of those who had faced the fiercest enemy. The sun ant had survived to build another day. Even now, Centuries later, archaeologists still find traces of that relentless war against the heat. Burn marks on granite blocks, soot stains on cooking pots, the cracked bones of cattle eaten during lean times. Yet what endures most is the design itself, precise, balanced, impossibly confident. To build with such grace under such hardship was not merely work. It was an act of devotion. Their struggle gave shape to enduring beauty, and the stones of Great Zimbabwe, warmed once by that merciless sun, still hold the memory, the laughter, and the spirit of those who tamed it. At Great Zimbabwe, every wall was built on a bargain. Not a deal struck with trade or coin, but one of flesh for stone, bone for permanence. Each sunrise marked the renewal of a quiet contract. You will give your body to the wall, and the wall will remember you when you are gone. The masons accepted this without complaint. To them, survival wasn't just about living. It was about belonging to something that would endure. But beneath this pride lay an exhaustion so deep it changed the rhythm of their hearts. Men learned to sleep in fragments moments, stolen between carrying heavy stones, breaths snatched in the shadows of unfinished towers. Let's pause here for a moment. Imagine the fire crackling softly. Listen to the stillness between the hammer blows, the profound silence of endurance itself. For many, the cost of this grand ambition began at home. In the valleys below, families watched their sons vanish into the dust, their backs swallowed by the hills. The women understood that when the men left to build the city, entire seasons would pass before their laughter returned. Some never came back at all, buried beneath the very walls they helped to raise. And yet, when the wind blew from the east, their wives and mothers swore they could hear them. The rhythmic thud of a hammer on granite, echoing across the distance like a steady heartbeat. In villages far from the site, children grew up recognizing that sound, the pulse of a relentless ambition carried on the air. It wasn't cruel. It was simply the wall's demand to be finished, and no man could refuse its call. The relentless sun took some. The crushing weight of the stones took others. But what truly wore them down was time itself. Days blurred into one another until the men measured weeks not by calendars, but by the layers of wall they completed. They forgot festivals, planting seasons, even the faces of their loved ones. A man might wake one morning and struggle to recall his own child's laughter. Survival had narrowed life down to a single, relentless goal. Lift the next stone, and then the next. Still, even in this harsh reality, they found a kind of poetry. When their hands bled, they would joke that the walls were thirsty. When the wind stung their eyes with dust, they'd say the ancestors were watching, testing their resolve. Pain became a form of prayer, a way to connect with those who had built before and those who would one day build again. Let's pause here again. The night deepens around our imaginary fire, and we can almost hear the echo of those unspoken prayers carried on the smoke. The healers kept a somber count of those who fell ill. Too many fainted from dehydration. Some developed fevers that clung to them through the nights, chills that no blanket could drive away. There was no modern medicine, only herbs and hope. Among them, however, one or two elders knew the language of the body so well they could foresee a man's end just by the look in his eyes. When death came, it was quiet. The other workers would stop, remove their headcloths, and stand in a heavy stillness. There was no wailing, no panicked only the sound of birds circling high above the valley. Then, at dusk, they would carry the body to the edge of the ruins, wrap it in woven grass mats, and place a single, smooth stone over the chest. The foreman's words would hang in the air. His sweat is in the wall. His breath is in the wind. They did not mark the graves. To them, memory didn't need physical markers. The city itself was the tombstone vast enough to hold all their stories. But the living were haunted by their own ghosts. In their dreams, they saw the faces of those who had fallen. Sometimes, when the wind whistled through unfinished corridors, they swore they could hear their voices. Others claimed that if you worked too close to sunset, you could see pale figures moving among the stones, their hands still lifting, their mouths still whispering a silent rhythm. No one ever spoke of fear. To admit fear was to break the spell that kept them working, day after day. Instead, they transformed these haunting sightings into myths. The ancestors are helping us, they would say. The walls built themselves at night, and perhaps, in some quiet, mystical way, they did. Because, with every dawn, the stones seemed to sit a little higher, the structure a little surer, as if guided by invisible hands. Let's pause once more. Listen to that faint hum in the air, the soft murmur of those who refuse to stop building, even in death. The price of survival wasn't only paid in sweat or spirit. It was paid in the small sacrifices that no one else would ever notice. Fingernails lost to the sharp edges of stone, knees that would never bend properly again, eyes that blinked constantly against the glare until they could no longer focus on the distant hills. Men grew old before they turned 30. Their hair was silvered with granite dust, long before time demanded it. And yet they smiled, because to them, age earned through labor was a badge of profound worth. A man with cracked palms and bowed shoulders was not a victim. He was a living story. The younger ones treated him like a walking archive, each scar a line of history, each limp a chapter in their shared legacy. When the rains finally came, they would stand in the downpour, arms outstretched, letting the cool water wash away months of heat and grime. Some said the rain was the ancestors' applause. The water rolled down the walls like tears not of sorrow, but of relief. By the time a section of the wall was complete, the masons knew every single stone like an old friend. They could tell you which ones were prone to crack under pressure, which ones fit best along a curve. The act of construction had transformed into something sacreder, silent dialogue between man and earth. And when the final block locked perfectly into place, a profound silence always followed. No one cheered, no one spoke. It was as if they feared that any sound might disturb the perfection they had achieved. For a few long breaths, they would simply stand, heads bowed, their hearts pounding in unison, not with pride, but with a deep, humbling awe. The wall had accepted their offering. Let's pause here, as the firelight dances gently across their faces. You can almost feel that quiet, reverent, heavy, solemn, and completely unspoken. The evenings were a balm for their wounds. After their meager meals, they would sit in small groups, trading stories about home, the smell of maize roasting over a fire, the sound of their children's laughter, the distant thrum of drums from their villages. Someone would always start to sing, softly at first, then a little louder, their voices weaving through the cool night air like threads of smoke. Those songs weren't just for joy. They were promises, oaths, that what they built here would protect their descendants. They sang that these walls would outlast droughts, wars, and the fading of memory itself. And they were right. Centuries later, the walls still stand, dry-lit, unmortared, and unbroken. Their perfect balance is a testament to faith and patience, to rhythm and rest. Every stone is a monument to the men who gave themselves completely to endurance, and to the immense cost of survival they paid so that this staggering beauty could exist. Now, as we sit beneath our own quiet night sky, it's easy to forget them, those nameless hands that shaped eternity from dust. But if you listen closely, you might still hear them. The faint rasp of stone on stone. the soft laughter under the African sun, the rhythm of an effort that never truly stopped. The walls remember, and through them the masons live on not as victims of toil, but as guardians of endurance. Their strength became architecture, their suffering became memory, and their silence became a song that the wind still hums through every curve of granite. And so the city stands not in defiance of death, but in agreement with it. A monument not just to what they built, but to everything they gave. Imagine a land sculpted by time itself, a vast, quiet plateau stretching beneath an eternal African sky. This was the canvas, the open grasslands where, centuries ago, the ancestors of the Shona people moved in rhythm with the earth. They were herders, their lives entwined with their cattle, following the soft pull of rivers and the promise of fertile soil. They were builders and traders, people of reason and reverence. And wherever they paused, their hands left an imprint on the land, a memory in the soil. At first, their world was made of small circles, rings of thatched huts, stones marking the warmth of a hearth, and enclosures for their precious cattle. Life pulsed with the seasons, a dance between the life-giving rain and the dry, whispering wind. It was a simple, profound existence, rooted in community and the cycles of nature. But slowly, imperceptibly at first, a new rhythm began to emerge. The cattle herds grew larger, and from the distant Swahili coast, traders started to arrive. They brought with them gleaming beads, colorful cloth, and stories of a world beyond the horizon. In the shadow of the granite hills, something new took root, ambition, and from that ambition, walls began to rise. But these were not walls of fear, built to keep the world out. They were walls of pride, of permanence. Stones, gathered from the surrounding hills, were stacked one upon another without a single drop of mortar. They were held together by nothing but perfect balance, patient craftsmanship, and an innate understanding of gravity. Each layer whispered of order, of purpose. To build in stone was a powerful declaration. We are here. We are a people of substance, and we will not be moved. And so, the great granite hill, the Kopi, began its transformation. It became a fortress, a sacred acropolis watching over the land. Below it, in the valley, a city began to spread like the roots of a great tree. It was a labyrinth of homes, workshops, and sacred spaces. Great Zimbabwe wasn't born in a single flash of inspiration. It grew organically, each generation adding its own rings of labor, belief, and aspiration. This wasn't just the construction of a city. It was the birth of a civilization. A process so powerful that its name would one day define an entire nation. The masons who shaped those first walls were more than just laborers. They were artisans working with a deep sense of reverence. Each stone was a living thing to them, something to be understood before it was placed. They would test it by touch and by sound, striking it lightly to feel its heart. If a stone rang hollow, it was cast aside, deemed unworthy. But if it sang with a clear, solid tone, it was welcomed, set carefully in its place. They believed the rocks themselves held spirits, that the ancient granite held the memories of the ancestors. Building was a conversation with the past and a promise to the future. And when they raised those magnificent, curving walls, they did not carve their own names into the stone. There were no monuments to individual architects or rulers. The city itself was the signature. Its elegant curves, its soaring height, its profound silence under the sun that was the testament. The achievement was collective, a symphony of purpose played out by thousands of hands over generations. As the years flowed into decades, and decades into centuries, the city swelled in both size and prestige. It became a tiered society, a reflection of its cosmology. The hilltop, the hill complex, became the sacred heart of the kingdom. A citadel where the rulers lived, quite literally, closer to the heavens and the spirits of their ancestors. From this vantage point, they could oversee their domain and commune with the divine forces that governed their world. Down in the valley, a different kind of energy pulsed. This was the beating heart of commerce, the great enclosure and the surrounding city. Here, the air buzzed with activity. Caravans, having traveled for weeks across dusty plains and through dense forests, arrived with their precious cargo. They brought salt, a vital commodity, copper for tools and adornments, vibrant glass beads from as far away as Persia, and fine cloth from India and China. In exchange, they left with the treasures of the Zimbabwean plateau, ivory, strong and beautiful, and gold. Ah, the gold. In that age, gold was more than just currency. It was a sacred substance. It was seen as the solidified tears of the sun, proof that the land was blessed by the heavens, that the ancestors smiled upon their people. The gold mines were carefully guarded, the process of its extraction shrouded in ritual. It was a tangible link between the earth and the divine, and its control was the foundation of the ruler's power. And those who ruled Great Zimbabwe were not kings in the way of other empires. They were not tyrants who ruled by force alone. They were known as *Mambo*. The title itself speaks to their role. A *Mambo* was a custodian of balance, a protector of the delicate harmony between the people and the land, between the physical world and the spiritual realm. Their authority wasn't just political, it was spiritual. They were the chief intermediaries with the ancestors, the ones responsible for ensuring the rains came, the crops grew, and the people prospered. Their home on the hill was an axis mundi, a connection point between heaven and earth. The society they presided over was intricate and highly organized. You had the royal family, the spiritual leaders, the skilled artisans, the masons, the potters, the weavers. You had the merchants, who managed the vast trade networks, and the soldiers who protected them. And you had the herders and farmers, the foundation upon which this entire civilization rested. Their lives still tied to the rhythms of the seasons, but now part of a much larger, more complex social organism. Think of the sheer logistics. To build these walls required quarrying thousands of tons of granite, shaping each block, and transporting it to the building site. It required a system for feeding and housing thousands of workers. To manage trade required sophisticated knowledge of logistics, diplomacy, and value. This was not a primitive society. It was a complex, thriving metropolis, the capital of a powerful and influential state. The great enclosure, with its famous conical tower, remains one of history's great mysteries. Was it a royal residence, a temple, an astronomical observatory? Perhaps it was all of these things. Its walls, 11 meters high and 5 meters thick in places, create a space of immense power and quiet dignity. Walking through its narrow passages, you can almost hear the echoes of the past, the murmur of courtiers, the chants of priests, the clinking of gold. The conical tower itself, built with the same meticulous stonework, has no doors or internal stairs. It is a solid structure, its purpose symbolic rather than functional. Some scholars believe it represents a grain bin, a symbol of the king's ability to provide for his people and a sign of good harvests and prosperity. Others see it as a phallic symbol, representing the masculine potency of the ruler and the fertility of the nation. Whatever its true meaning, it stands as a unique and powerful piece of architectural expression, a silent testament to the beliefs and aspirations of the people who built it. And so, from scattered pastoral communities, a city of stone rose to dominate the southern African landscape. It was a center of political power, a hub of international trade, and a place of profound spiritual significance. Great Zimbabwe was a testament to the ingenuity, faith, and ambition of the Shona people. They took the raw materials of their land, the granite, the gold, the soil, and transformed them into a civilization that would echo through the corridors of time. They built a capital so magnificent that its name, Zimbabwe, meaning great houses of stone, would be chosen. Centuries later, for the modern nation, a permanent reminder of this glorious African legacy. When Great Zimbabwe reached its zenith, its influence radiated far beyond the high plateau, becoming a legendary nexus of commerce and power. Imagine caravans, long and winding, snaking through the lowlands, their most precious cargo being the city's gold. This wasn't just metal. It was the lifeblood of an empire, destined for the bustling Swahili ports that dotted the coast. There, amidst the scent of salt and spices, Arab and Persian traders, seasoned by the monsoon winds, eagerly awaited its arrival. They would load this gleaming treasure onto their dhows, the lateen sails billowing as they set course for the far-flung markets of Arabia, India, and even the distant mythical lands of China. With every grain of gold dust that left its gates, Great Zimbabwe exported a piece of its story, a whisper of its unmatched greatness that traveled across oceans. In return, the same trade winds that carried its fame away brought back wonders from other worlds. Imagine crates being pried open to reveal lustrous silks from the east, so smooth they felt like water, and delicate porcelain bowls, their surfaces painted with intricate designs of dragons and phoenixes. Colorful glass beads from distant workshops clattered like tiny jewels, each one a testament to a world connected by the human desire for beauty and exchange. These weren't just goods. They were conversations between civilizations, treasures that spoke of distant realms and expanded the horizons of the people who held them. At its very heart, Great Zimbabwe was a city built on symbolism. The magnificent stone walls that are so famous today were not primarily fortresses designed to repel invaders. There is little evidence of major warfare at the city's peak. Instead, these structures were profound expressions of power, prestige, and divine legitimacy. They were a form of political and social theatre on a grand scale. To live within a stone enclosure, to have your home defined by these masterfully cut granite blocks, was to be someone of importance. It marked you as part of the elite, a person to be seen, to be respected, and ultimately to be remembered long after you were gone. The act of building itself was a declaration. To build higher, to stack stone upon stone, reaching towards the sky, was a physical manifestation of ambition, a way to reach closer to the divine and to solidify one's place in the cosmic order. Among all its structures, the great enclosure stood apart, a breathtaking monument to both devotion and might. Its massive outer wall, over 11 meters high in some places, doesn't follow a rigid, straight line. It curves gracefully, a smooth, deliberate, and unbroken circle that encloses its mysteries within. It's a masterpiece of dry stone construction, built without any mortar to hold the millions of stones together. Inside this enigmatic space rises the conical tower. Standing like a silent, solid drum, it reaches towards the sky. Its purpose still a subject of intense debate among scholars and archaeologists today. Was it a granary, symbolizing the king's ability to provide for his people? Was it an astronomical observatory, or something else entirely? While we may debate its function, the people of the time likely understood its meaning implicitly. For them, it was a potent symbol, a representation of fertility, of the continuity of their people, and perhaps even the very womb of the nation. from which its strength and future generations would spring. A short distance away, perched atop a natural granite hill, the hill complex shimmered in the morning light. This was the spiritual and political nerve center of the kingdom. Its terraces of granite and daga were the stage for the most sacred rituals. Here, the Mambo, the king, along with his council of elders and spiritual advisors, communed with the ancestors. The spirits of past kings were believed to reside here, watching over the living and guiding their destiny. From this sacred height, royal decrees were announced, their words echoing down to the valley below. It was here that offerings of beer and grain were poured onto the sacred ground, and blessings were sought for the rains, for the harvest, and for the prosperity of the entire kingdom. The hill complex was the bridge between the earthly and the spiritual realms, the place where the king affirmed his divine right to rule. Down in the valley, below the sacred hill and the imposing enclosures, life pulsed with a vibrant, everyday rhythm. The air was filled with a symphony of sounds. The sharp, rhythmic ring of hammers on hot copper as blacksmiths forged tools, weapons, and jewelry. The lively chatter of traders in the marketplace, their fingers deftly counting out strings of beads or weighing gold dust. The low hum of conversation as women ground grain on stone slabs. The air itself carried the rich sense of community life, the slightly sweet, fermented aroma of millet beer brewing in large clay pots, and the comforting smell of roasted grain and simmering stews. Life here was industrious and communal. Among the artisans and farmers, the masons held a unique position. While their social status might have been lower than that of the priests or the royal chiefs, they walked with a quiet, undeniable dignity. These were the master builders, the men whose skill and labor gave form to the king's vision. They understood the language of stone, knowing just how to shape and fit each granite block to create walls that would stand for centuries. They knew, with a certainty that few others could claim, that they were not just building houses or walls, they were building eternity. Their legacy was written in the very fabric of the city. Great Zimbabwe's immense wealth was not hidden away in secret vaults or buried chests. It was a wealth meant to be seen, to be experienced, to be lived. It was displayed in the monumental architecture that dominated the landscape, in the elaborate ceremonies that marked the passing of seasons, and in the vast herds of cattle that were the ultimate symbol of prosperity. Gleaming, carved ivory horns and other precious artifacts decorated the courtyards of the elite. The city was a living map of the kingdom's hierarchy and its sacred design. A person's home was a direct reflection of their place in society. Those closest to the hill complex, the spiritual heart of the city, were the powerful elite, living nearest to the source of royal and divine authority. Further down, in the valley, lived the artisans, traders, and warriors. And on the outer edges, closest to the vast grazing lands, dwelt the laborers and herders. It was a society of intricate order, where every path led to a specific purpose, and every stone carried a deep, symbolic meaning. However, as is often the case in history, great wealth and power inevitably attract rivalry and instability. The city's dominance drew the envy of neighboring chiefdoms who coveted its resources and control over trade. At the same time, the immense concentration of power and wealth may have stoked hunger and ambition from within the royal family itself, leading to internal political struggles. The world outside of Great Zimbabwe was also changing. Crucial trade routes began to shift, as coastal merchants and international traders found new partners and new sources for gold and ivory. Compounding these political and economic pressures, the climate began to change. The reliable rains that had nourished their crops and pastures for generations became less generous. leading to periods of drought. The soil, farmed intensively for centuries to feed the large population, grew tired and less productive. The very grandeur that had once seemed endless and divinely ordained began to strain under its own immense weight. The foundations of this great civilization were slowly, but surely, beginning to crack. But even as the city faced decline, even as its population began to disperse to new, more fertile lands, the spirit of pride and cultural identity endured. It lived on in the vibrant festivals that continued to celebrate the harvest, in the songs passed down from one generation to the next, and in the sacred rituals that still honored the ancestors under the light of the full moon. For the people of Great Zimbabwe, even the slow fading of their great city could not erase its memory or its meaning. The stones themselves, silent witnesses to centuries of triumphs and tribulations, had seen too much to ever forget. They remain today a powerful and enduring testament to a truly remarkable African civilization. To speak the word Zimbabwe is to speak of identity. It comes from the Shona phrase, Jimbudsamabwe, houses of stone. This is a name not born of fantasy, but of foundation. It speaks of a reality etched into the very earth. A testament to a civilization that rose from the African soil, mighty and supported. For centuries, this name was whispered, a half-forgotten legend, until it was reclaimed, roaring back to life as the name of a modern nation. This is the story of that name, and the stone legacy it represents. Imagine a kingdom so grand, so advanced, that centuries after its decline, its ruins still command, or long after the fires in its hearths went cold and the bustling markets fell silent, the ruins of Great Zimbabwe stood untouched. Nature began its slow reclamation, with vines creeping over walls and grass pushing through the ancient courtyards. Yet, even overgrown, the site remained majestic, a silent monument to a forgotten power. Travelers who stumbled upon it spoke in hushed tones, weaving tales of ancient kings, of gold and treasure buried deep beneath the silent walls. They saw a ghost of a city, a place where history itself seemed to sleep. But when European explorers arrived in the 19th century, they brought with them a heavy cloak of disbelief. They gazed upon the intricate artistry, the brilliant engineering, the sheer scale of the stone structures, and they could not reconcile it with their own prejudices. They looked at the sophisticated dry stone technique, the towering conical tower, the massive enclosing walls that curved with such organic grace. And they concluded, surely this was made by others. They spun elaborate theories, attributing the construction to Phoenicians, to Arabs, even to the mythical Queen of Sheba, that the ancestors of the Shona people who lived right there in the shadow of their own heritage. It was a narrative of denial, an attempt to erase African genius from the pages of history. But the land remembered. The people remembered. While outsiders saw mystery, the local Shona people saw heritage. The spirit of Great Zimbabwe was never about a puzzle to be solved. It was about mastery. It was about the mastery of the land, understanding its rhythms and resources. It was about the mastery of trade, creating a commercial hub that connected the African interior with the far-flung ports of the Indian Ocean, trading gold, ivory, and other precious goods. It was about the mastery of craft, with skilled masons shaping granite blocks without mortar, fitting them together so perfectly that their creations have endured for nearly a millennium. And it was a mastery of spirit, a deep connection to the ancestral world that infused every stone with meaning and purpose. Even today, to walk among those stones is to experience something profound. There's a palpable feeling that the air itself holds memory, As you wander through the labyrinthine passages of the hill complex or stand within the vast great enclosure, the world outside seems to fade away. The walls, they don't just stand there. They curve like the lines of a drum, their form echoing the natural shapes of the surrounding granite hills. The stones, each one unique, fit together like verses in an old, powerful song. If you close your eyes and listen, truly listen, you can almost hear it, the echo of iron hammers striking stone, the distant laughter of builders sharing a joke under the hot sun, the low rhythmic murmur of prayers offered at dusk from the highest point of the city. You can almost feel the pulse of a society that was vibrant, complex, and deeply in tune with its environment. It's not just a collection of old rocks, it's a sensory experience, a journey back in time. And though time, wind, and rain have softened the sharp edges of the stones and silenced the voices of its inhabitants, the message of Great Zimbabwe endures, clear and resolute. Africa's greatness was never borrowed, was built. It was built with local materials, with local ingenuity, and with a vision that was entirely its own. The civilization that flourished here was not an imitation. It was an origination. It was a bold declaration of cultural and political power, written in stone for all the world to see. A story of self-reliance and innovation that challenges every tired cliché about the continent's past. So, when the modern nation of Zimbabwe chose this name upon gaining its independence in 1980, it was an act of profound significance. It was far more than mere symbolism. It was reclamation. It was a conscious decision to shed a colonial name, Rhodesia, which honored a foreign conqueror, and to embrace a name that sprang from the very soul of the land. It was the voice of the ancestors, suppressed for generations, rising once again through the dust and stone. The ruins of Great Zimbabwe became sacred ground, not just because they were old, but because they were proof. They were tangible, undeniable proof that civilization, complex society, and profound wisdom had deep, ancient African roots. It was a way of saying to the world, and more importantly, to themselves, we have a history that predates any flag planted on our soil by an outsider. We have a legacy of kings, of builders, of innovators. The spirit of Great Zimbabwe, therefore, is the spirit of endurance. It's a spirit that says, even when walls fall, even when empires crumble and cities are abandoned, the ground remembers. The truth remains. It is a spirit that teaches us a vital lesson, that true greatness is not found in what you conquer or what you own, but in what you build physically, culturally, and spiritually for the generations that will come after you. The masons of Great Zimbabwe didn't build for their own glory. They built a home, a fortress, a spiritual center that would serve their children and their children's children. They built for eternity. And so, as the sun sets and night folds its dark blanket over those ancient stones, a new kind of life emerges. The crickets begin their soft hymns under the silvery light of the African moon. The stones, now dark silhouettes against the starry sky, seem to absorb the quiet of the night. In this tranquil moment, the story of Great Zimbabwe continues. It's a story not confined to textbooks or locked behind glass in a museum. It lives on in the hearts of the Zimbabwean people, in the pride they take in their heritage, in a spirit that still beats to the ancient rhythm of creation, innovation, and resilience. For long after the masons have laid down their tools and their names have been lost to time, the stones remain. They are silent, but they are not still. They carry the weight of centuries. They are broken in places, but they are not defeated. Their presence is a powerful declaration, and in their profound silence, they whisper a timeless truth to all who would listen. We were here. We built this. we are still here. Have you ever heard a stone speak? It sounds like an odd question, but for the master masons of Great Zimbabwe, it was the first principle of their craft. In the heart of southern Africa, long before the age of blueprints and steel, a quiet genius was at work, crafting a language without letters, a geometry older than any ruler. The people who built this incredible city spoke this language fluently. To them, every single rock was alive, humming with a story, a purpose. When they set out to build, they didn't see a pile of inert material to be conquered. They saw a community of stones. They didn't force them into obedience. Instead, they listened. They would run their hands over the granite, feeling its grain, tracing the lines on its weathered face, even tapping it to test its unique sound. They held a profound belief. The land had already designed its own architecture. The mason's true task wasn't to invent something new, but to reveal the structure that was already there, hidden within the landscape. They called this philosophy building with respect, a practice that was as much spiritual as it was technical. And the results of this philosophy are so astonishing that they continue to humble engineers today. Imagine walls that rise in graceful, sweeping arcs, standing firm for centuries, without a single drop of mortar to bind them together. This incredible feat was achieved through the art of dry stone construction. It's a technique that relies on a delicate, almost magical balance of gravity, pressure, and pure intuition. Each massive granite block began its journey in fire and water. The masons would light intense fires against the rock face, heating its surface until it was scorching hot. Then they'd douse it with cold water, causing the stone to crack cleanly along its natural lines. This was their way of quarrying, using the elements as their tools. After that came the long, patient hours of shaping and fitting. There were no steel chisels, no iron pulleys or complex machinery. There was only the human hand, guided by a deep, knowing patience that had been passed down through generations. The masons used a sophisticated interlocking method. The largest, heaviest stones were laid at the base, their broad, flat faces creating an unshakable foundation. As the walls rose, smaller, carefully shaped stones were placed with incredible precision. The walls themselves were designed to taper inward ever so slightly. This wasn't a mistake. It was a stroke of genius. This subtle angle distributed the immense weight of the stones evenly downward, channeling the force into the earth. The result was a structure that was not rigid but alive. It breathed with the land, expanding in the heat and contracting in the cold, shifting with the seasons, yet never breaking. This wasn't just construction. It was a conversation between the builder and the stone, a partnership that has lasted for nearly 1,000 years. Their tools for measurement were the cosmos itself, the sun, the stars, and the line of the horizon. When they needed to create a perfect, elegant curve for a wall or a tower, they didn't draw diagrams or use complex formulas. They walked them. The lead mason would pace out the radius barefoot, feeling the ground beneath him. He would mark the arcs with simple sticks or smaller stones, trusting his own innate sense of balance and proportion far more than any mechanical instrument. This intuitive geometry is what gives Great Zimbabwe its organic, flowing beauty. You'll notice that no two walls are exactly alike. Yet every single one harmonizes perfectly with the surrounding landscape. The builders didn't impose a rigid grid on the land. Instead, they followed the natural contours of the hills, curving their structures to echo the flow of ancient rivers and the direction of the wind. It truly feels as though the city grew out of the earth, rather than being built upon it. How was this incredible knowledge preserved and passed on? There were no written manuals, no textbooks of engineering. The wisdom of the masons lived in memory and in practice. It was a legacy transferred directly from father to son, from master to apprentice. On the construction site itself, lessons were often sung, set to the rhythm of hammer strokes on stone. Each beat, each melody, carried a piece of vital instruction. A reminder: find the heart of the stone, listen before you lift. This oral tradition ensured that the technical skills were inseparable from the spiritual respect that defined their work. They were taught not just how to build, but why they were building. They built not to impress a visiting dignitary or to display temporary power. They built to endure. They were building not just for kings, but for continuity, for the generations that would follow, creating a home that would stand as a testament to their connection with the land. So, when modern archaeologists and engineers arrived centuries later, they were baffled. They tried to decode the work, searching for mathematical formulas, for the secret equations that would explain such perfection, but they found none. What they found was something that couldn't be measured: the symmetry of feeling, the geometry of faith. The masons of Great Zimbabwe didn't just build walls, they built a profound silence, a silent strength capable of withstanding the passage of centuries. They showed the world that the most enduring structures are not those built with force, but those built with understanding, respect, and a deep, abiding love for the world around us. Their legacy is not just in the stones that remain, but in the powerful lesson they teach us even today. When you stand within the great enclosure and look up at the soaring curve of the wall, you feel it, that sense of order that's larger than any single human hand. Every line, every circle, every tower seems to hum with a quiet, powerful alignment. This wasn't an accident. This was a statement. This was faith made tangible. To the builders of Great Zimbabwe, architecture was not separate from spirituality. The stones mirrored the heavens. The walls echoed the silent rhythm of the stars. The entire city's layout was a masterclass in balancer, physical representation of harmony between humanity and nature, between the ruler and the people, between the world we can see and the world we cannot. At the very heart of this ancient metropolis stood the conical tower, a structure that is both elegantly simple and profoundly mysterious. Its smooth, tapering shape is often compared to a traditional Shona granaria, vessel of life, a storehouse of sustenance for the community. This wasn't just a random architectural choice. Many scholars believe it symbolized fertility, abundance, and the prosperity of the kingdom. It served as a constant, silent reminder that true leadership was not about domination or raw power, but about nourishment. A good ruler, like a full granary, ensures the people are fed, cared for, and that the community thrives. This single tower, without a single word carved into it, speaks volumes about the philosophy that underpinned this great civilization. The city itself was designed as a dialogue of opposites. High on the hill, overlooking everything, was the hill complex. This was the spiritual realm, the home of the king and the religious leaders, a place closer to the heavens. Down below, spreading across the valley floor, were the valley enclosures, the residential areas symbolizing the human world, the realm of daily life. And between them, flowing like an invisible river, was a powerful current of connection, a force binding heaven and earth, the sacred and the profane. This wasn't just city planning. It was a physical map of their cosmic understanding, a way to live within their beliefs every single day. The very act of walking from the valley to the hill was a journey from the earthly to the divine. The masons, the unsung geniuses of this place, wove these beliefs into every single curve and joint of the walls. Look closely, and you'll notice that straight walls are incredibly rare. Instead, the architecture is dominated by circles and elegant curves. For them, the circle represented unity, and the concept of eternal life a continuous loop with no beginning and no end. Perfection wasn't found in rigid, straight lines, but in flow, in gentle, organic movement. Their worldview saw profound beauty in the natural cycles of life, in movement, not in the harsh, straight lines of conquest or control. This architecture doesn't command, it embraces. It doesn't intimidate, it envelops. It's said that before the first stone was ever laid, the elders and spirit mediums would perform sacred rituals on the chosen site. They would gather on the granite soil, communing with the land itself. They offered gifts to the ancestors who watched from beneath the soil, traditional beer, fragrant herbs, and sometimes the blood of a goat. These weren't just superstitious gestures. They were acts of respect, of asking permission only after the omens were good, after the spiritual world had given its blessing. Could the heavy stones be lifted and placed? To build without this blessing was to invite collapse, not just the physical collapse of a wall, but the far more dangerous collapse of the community's harmony, its spiritual balance. This extraordinary fusion of art, science, and spirituality produced something truly timeless. The masons of Great Zimbabwe weren't just aiming for physical strength, for walls that could withstand time and attack. They were seeking a much deeper resonance at cosmic balance. The stones were aligned not only with the laws of gravity, ensuring their stability for centuries, but also with intention, with a spiritual purpose. Every single block was part of a larger, sacred geometry. This is why the structure feels so right, so deeply peaceful, even after almost a millennium. It wasn't just built, it was consecrated. Imagine being there as the sun begins to set. The low, golden light catches the granite, and the walls cast long, elegant shadows that fall in perfect proportion across the ground. The patterns shift and glide like the arms of a giant sundial, marking the passage of time not by the ticking of a clock, but by the changing of color and light. Even the placement of the entrances reflects this deep sense of order and philosophy. You'll often find yourself walking through narrow, constricting paths that suddenly open up into wide, expansive courtyards. This was a deliberate architectural lesson, reminding all who entered that humility precedes power, that one must pass through a narrow gate to reach a place of importance. It's a journey of transition, a physical metaphor for personal and societal growth. Great Zimbabwe was so much more than a city. It was more than a capital, more than a fortress. It was a prayer written in stone, a testament to a worldview where the physical and the spiritual were inseparable. Every wall, every enclosure, every passageway was part of a grand, unified statement about their place in the universe. And if you stand there today, in the quiet of the evening, as the twilight softens the ancient granite to gold, you can almost feel it. You can feel the pulse of its geometry, a rhythm that isn't cold or mechanical, but deeply, profoundly human. It's the rhythm of creation itself, a timeless connection that links the heart of a person to the vast, silent map of the stars. They say that when the wind passes through the heart of Great Zimbabwe, it carries a voice. The locals, those who have lived in the shadow of these granite giants for generations, will tell you that the walls sing. It's not a melody you'd recognize, not a tune with notes and lyrics. It is something far more ancient, more profound. It's a presence, a low, resonant hum, like the very breath of ancestors lingering between the stones, a sound that has echoed across centuries. Imagine standing there at dusk, as the final rays of sunlight retreat from the hill complex. The world grows quiet, but the air begins to stir. If you listen closely, truly listen, the locals say you can hear it. Faint laughter carried on the breeze. whispers of conversations held long ago, the distant, rhythmic clink of iron tools against granite. The wind, in its endless journey, catches in the countless small spaces between the massive stones, and in doing so, it transforms the profound silence into a living memory. It's the sound of time remembering itself, playing back the soundtrack of a civilization that has never truly left. The Shona masons who crafted this marvel held a deep belief that every wall they built held a spirit. To them, placing one stone upon another was not merely a construction task. It was an act of awakening. Each stone was a dormant being, and by fitting it perfectly into the hole, they were breathing life into it. This philosophy transformed the very nature of their work. The walls, therefore, were never just boundaries to keep things in or out. They were vessels of life, designed to enclose not just physical space, but meaning, purpose, and spiritual energy. Some oral traditions passed down through the ages tell a beautiful story about this process. It's said that the master masons would sing as they worked. Their songs weren't just for entertainment, they were functional, spiritual, and deeply connected to their craft. Each song was carefully composed to match the rhythm of laying the heavy stones, guiding the hands of the entire workforce to move in perfect, fluid harmony. A chorus would rise as a new layer was started. A verse would guide the fitting of a tricky corner. But these songs were more than just a tool for coordination. They were seen as incantations, as spells of protection woven into the very fabric of the walls. Blessings of endurance meant to ensure that their creation would withstand the tests of time. And though the sound of those human voices faded centuries ago, the stones themselves seemed to have kept the rhythm. The masons embedded their songs into the granite. Walk along the passages, and you'll see that each wall has become a verse in a grand, silent poem. Each towering conical structure, a chorus reaching for the sky. When you view Great Zimbabwe as a whole, you realize it's a hymn. A magnificent piece of architecture that can only be fully heard through the mediums of wind and silence. The structure itself is an instrument. In a way, you can think of Great Zimbabwe as an enormous, silent musical instrument, a drum of stone, waiting for the elements to play it. The sound of the air whistling through the gaps between meticulously placed blocks, the echo of your own footsteps against the ancient granite pathways, the gentle whisper of tall grass brushing against the base of the wall. These subtle sounds combine. They merge into a kind of ancient lullaby, a soothing, powerful hum that reminds you that even in profound stillness, life sings on. It's a testament to the idea that a place can hold on to its energy, its vitality, long after its creators are gone. And perhaps that is the greatest mystery of this incredible place. How can something made of silence and stone still speak so clearly to us today? How can it communicate its history, its power, and its spirit without a single written word? The answer lies in the people who still live near the ruins. They continue to treat the site not as a relic of the past, but as a living, sacred space. Before entering, it's common to see many pour libations of water or traditional beer onto the earth, murmuring quiet greetings to the ancestors. They do this because they know the walls are watching. Not as haunting ghosts, but as benevolent guardians, as keepers of their heritage. This reverence highlights a fundamental truth about this place. Here, memory is not something that was written in ink or carved into a script that could fade or be lost. It is built, it is breathed, and it is born again with every single gust of wind that sweeps across the plateau. The history is tangible. You can touch it with your hands, feel it on your skin. The voices of the past are not recorded. They are simply present, waiting for a quiet moment and a listening ear. The masons themselves are long gone. Their specialized tools have returned to the earth. Their individual names have been forgotten by time. But their art, their incredible achievement, remains. It is resilient, standing against the centuries. It is radiant, glowing in the African sun. And it is resonant, humming with the stories of its creation. Every single stone, weighing tons in some cases, still stands precisely where a human intention placed it. Every wall still holds the unmistakable pattern of human care, of a community working together with a shared vision. They built not for a lifetime, but for eternity. And so, Great Zimbabwe does not merely exist as a pile of stones on a hill. It listens, it endures, it dreams. It is an active participant in the landscape, a silent observer of the passage of time. If you stand there, close your eyes, and let the sounds of the place wash over you, you can almost imagine the hands that built it. You can picture them dark, calloused from their work, yet confident and precise in their movements. In your mind's eye, you can almost feel them not just shaping stone, but shaping time itself, creating a legacy that would echo far beyond their own lives. Each wall seems to send a clear message across the ages. I was made to last, and from the wind, from the stones, from the very silence of the place, an echo replies, and so you shall. In the world of Great Zimbabwe, few titles carried as much weight as Master of the Craft. This wasn't a position you inherited through bloodline or bought with sacks of gold. It was a title earned through sweat, silence, and 1,000 careful touches of stone upon stone. The builders of Great Zimbabwe weren't just laborers. They were part of a revered guild of artisans, a tradition passed down through generations, bound by memory and a shared, sacred duty. Their hands held secrets that were never written down, their skills guarded as fiercely as a sacred fire. To become a mason was to be chosen. Imagine, as a young boy, you would watch your father at dawn, tracing the lines of shadows cast by the sun, learning to measure its arc across a wall in progress. You would learn to read the natural cracks and veins in a slab of granite the way others read scripture. Your body would grow strong from lifting what seemed unliftable, and your mind would grow patient enough to wait for the stone itself to tell you where it belonged. It was a deep, intuitive connection between man and material. Each family had its own lineage of builders, and apprenticeships started early. It was a total immersion. Some boys were even known to sleep beside the very walls they were working on. They would lay their heads down near the cool granite, listening in the quiet of the night, believing that dreams would carry whispered instructions from the ancestors who built before them. They lived and breathed their craft, their entire world shaped by the rhythm of construction. The wall was not just a project, it was a living entity that they were a part of. These guilds weren't formal institutions with written rules and membership cards. They were living brotherhoods, communities of skill. Within these brotherhoods, the hierarchy was precise and respected. You had the stone reader, an individual with an almost supernatural ability to interpret the natural grain of granite, knowing exactly where it would split and how it would bear weight. You had the wall singer, who led chants and songs throughout the long days of labor, their voices setting a rhythm that unified the team, turning grueling work into a collective, almost spiritual performance. And at the very top was the master mason. He wasn't just a foreman barking orders. He was the keeper of the rhythm, the living embodiment of the balance between human effort and divine intention. He understood the harmony of the entire project. Those who excelled in the craft rose to positions of immense reverence. Chiefs and even kings knew their names. A master mason might be gifted cattle, precious beads, or even wives-all, signs of profound respect that elevated his entire household within the community. His children would never go hungry because the kingdom's future, its very stability, rested upon the precision of his work. But this high status never freed them from humility. A core belief, a saying passed down among the masons, was, "The proud hand drops the stone." Skill was a gift to be exercised with care and respect, never with arrogance. The builder, who worked without a humble heart, without offering the proper blessings, was seen as risking the wrath of the ancestors. It was believed that their walls might mysteriously crack, or that the workers under their supervision might fall ill. Pride was the enemy of permanence. Every stone laid was an act of humility. Therefore, each towering wall of Great Zimbabwe was born of both immense physical strength and sincere prayer. Before starting a major section of a wall, the masons would gather before the rising sun. They would sprinkle water from clay pots onto the earth, a ritual of purification and life, and whisper thanks to the spirits who gave them the endurance and wisdom for the task ahead. It was a sacred contract between the builders, the land, and the spiritual world. This wasn't just construction. It was a ceremony. It was uncommon for songs and epic poems to be composed and dedicated to famous buildersmen, whose walls remained standing for centuries, long after others had crumbled. The people remembered them not as mere workers, but as artists who gave shape to silence and permanence to a vision. In a very real way, the masons of Great Zimbabwe were among the first African engineers. They were mathematicians of instinct, using shadow and rope to achieve geometric perfection. They were philosophers of stone, understanding its properties not just physically, but spiritually. Their tools were simple stone, hammers, chisels, the sun, and their own incredible ingenuity. But their results, as you can see today, are eternal. Every masterpiece, every city that defies time, requires not only the hands that build it, but the mind that dreams it into existence. At the heart of Great Zimbabwe, that dream belonged to the king. He was the central pillar around which this entire civilization turned, a ruler whose authority flowed from both the throne and the spirit world. He was more than just a monarch. He was the spiritual nucleus of his people, the very voice through which the ancestors spoke. The Shona word for King Mambo carries a profound weight. It isn't just about power. It implies order, harmony, and a divine responsibility. The Mambo was the ultimate guardian of both the land and the law, tasked with the immense duty of ensuring that the kingdom's delicate balance remained intact. His palace, perched high on the hill, was not merely a residence. It was the axis of their world, the point where heaven and earth met. When he looked out across his sprawling city, he saw more than just meticulously stacked stones. He saw a living tapestry of symbolism. The magnificent great enclosure with its soaring, curved walls represented the very idea of fertility and the continuity of his people. The hill complex, his own sacred domain, symbolized the undeniable authority of the ancestors watching over them. And the valley settlements, bustling with life, reflected the daily rhythms and flow of the community. Every single structure, from the smallest hut to the grandest wall, was imbued with a moral and cosmic purpose, all part of his grand vision. This vision was so powerful that it brought together seemingly disparate worlds. Under his direct guidance, skilled masons and revered spirit mediums collaborated in a way that is almost hard for us to imagine today. The building of the city's iconic walls was treated as a sacred act, a physical process of aligning human life with divine intention. It was a prayer in stone, a testament to a worldview where the physical and spiritual were one and the same. Nothing was left to chance. Before a single stone was laid for a new section, the king would consult the diviners. These were the spiritual experts who could read the unseen world. They would cast bones, interpret patterns in ash, or watch the flight of birds to decipher omens. Their role was to confirm that the ancestors and the spirits of the land approved of the construction. Only once the signs were overwhelmingly favorable could the work begin. And even then, it began not with a shovel, but with a ceremony. Rituals were performed to sanctify the ground and the endeavor. A sacred fire, a direct link to the ancestral realm, would be lit within the palace. The fragrant smoke of incense, carrying prayers and requests for blessings, would be offered to the spirits. Across the valley, the deep, resonant calls of drums would echo, songs of calling and invitation carried on the wind, informing the entire kingdom that a sacred task was underway. Imagine the scene: the mambo, seated beneath a shaded canopy, attendants gently fanning him, his gaze sweeping across the valley below. The air is thick with the rhythmic, hypnotic pulse of drums. It's a sound that travels for miles, a constant reminder of the king's presence and the spiritual gravity of their work. The king himself seldom, if ever, lifted a stone. His role wasn't manual labor, yet his spirit was infused into every single granite block. He was understood by all to be the ultimate architect, not of the physical design, but of the kingdom's destiny. The builders, masons, and laborers all worked under his spiritual blessing. Their success, the perfection of their walls, was seen as a direct reflection of the king's moral strength and his favor with the ancestors. When visitors arrived at Great Zimbabwe, and they came from far and wide, they were utterly astounded. Traders from the bustling Swahili coast, carrying goods from as far as Arabia and China, and emissaries from other distant kingdoms, would stand in the shadow of these massive walls and marvel at the sight. The sheer scale and precision of Great Zimbabwe spoke a silent, powerful message. Here is a people who command both the earth and the spirit. Here is a kingdom of immense power and stability. But this was a different kind of power. It wasn't the power of conquest, expressed through armies and domination. It was the power of composition, of harmony. It was the ability to take a rugged, natural landscape and shape it into a reflection of cosmic order. The city itself was a statement of their philosophy, that true strength lies in balance, not brute force. This balance was reinforced daily through the rituals of the palace. Every single dawn, as the first light touched the granite hills, the sacred fire in the royal court was tended. This fire was never allowed to go out. Its flames symbolized the eternal continuity of the kingdom, a living link connecting the current ruler, the Mambo, to the entire lineage of ancestors who came before him. No important decision, whether it was about trade, justice, or planting crops, was ever made without first consulting that fire. Its smoke would rise straight toward the sky, a daily, visible offering of the immense burden of leadership. And then there were the drums. Their sound would roll across the valley, floor slow, rhythmic, deliberate. They were the heartbeat of the kingdom. These drums did not call to war. They called to order, to focus, to unity. It's said that the masons working in the valley below would often pause their work when they heard the drums begin. They would stand still, listen, and feel the rhythm. It was as if they were receiving a signal directly from the king, a reassurance that their hands and their work were perfectly lined with the heartbeat of the Mambo and the will of the ancestors. And so, through this intricate web of belief, ritual, and labor, every stone became part of a vision far larger than itself. It wasn't just a building block. It was a prayer, a piece of a legacy, a note in a grand symphony of civilization. When the Mambo himself walked along the top of the walls, surveying his kingdom, He didn't see a monument to his own ego or vanity. He saw a legacy. He saw a city that could outlast flesh and bone, a physical manifestation of his people's spirit. He saw a kingdom built not on the shaky foundations of fear, but on the unshakable bedrock of reverence. He knew, with the certainty of a man who communes with eternity, that the very same stones that protected his reign would one day stand as silent guardians of his memory. They would tell his story, the story of his people, and the story of a kingdom that understood that true power is built in harmony with the cosmos. The walls of Great Zimbabwe are more than a ruin. They are the enduring spirit of the Mumbo's dream. When empires fade, they often leave behind ghost towns, places where life once thrived, but now only silence remains. Great Zimbabwe, however, was different. When its time as the center of a vast trade network began to wane, as new powers rose along the coast, the city didn't die. It transformed. The people moved on, scattering across the landscape, but they carried the spirit of the city with them. They didn't abandon their heritage. They wove it into the very fabric of their culture. In their songs and stories, they preserved the memory of the builders, elevating them from mere mortals to legendary figures, demigods who could command the earth itself and teach stone to remember. It was said that the masons of Great Zimbabwe weren't just skilled craftsmen. They were chosen, guided by ancestral spirits in their dreams. They were tasked with raising walls that could never truly fall. And in a way, they succeeded. Even as the bustling courtyards fell silent and grass began to push its way between the perfectly fitted stones, the reverence for this place never faded. The abandoned city became a sacred shrine. For centuries that followed, travelers passing through the valley would stop to pour libations, whispering their thanks for safe passage and leaving small tokens of respect. Hunters, before venturing into the surrounding lands, would leave offerings of salt or beads, acknowledging the ancient power that still resided there. And mothers, pointing to the towering granite walls, would tell their children, "These are the stones that remember." They were teaching them that history wasn't just in books. It was in the world around them, solid and enduring. Over time, the individual identities of the builders were lost to history. Their names faded like echoes, but their collective achievement became immortal. The city they built stood as undeniable proof of African ingenuity, a testament to a sophisticated civilization that flourished long before the outside world even knew it existed, let alone cared to acknowledge it. The sheer scale and precision of the stonework were a silent, powerful statement. This was not a primitive outpost. It was the heart of a kingdom, a center of culture, faith, and power, conceived and constructed by African hands and African minds. The legacy wasn't about a single king or a single builder. It was about the genius of a people. This conviction remained unshaken even during the colonial era, when European explorers and settlers first encountered the magnificent ruins. Many refused to believe they could be the work of local people. They spun elaborate, baseless theories, attributing the construction to everyone from ancient Phoenicians to the Queen of Sheba. It was a narrative born of prejudice, a refusal to accept that such architectural sophistication could originate from sub-Saharan Africa. But while these outsiders debated and condescended, the local Shona people never wavered. They knew the truth. It was in their oral histories, in the rhythm of their music, that echoed the ancient sound of hammers striking stone. They knew whose ancestors had quarried, shaped, and laid every single one of those million granite blocks. For them, Great Zimbabwe wasn't just a historical site. It was a rebuke to the colonial mindset, a powerful, physical reminder that African history was written in stone long before it was ever written on paper by outsiders. Today, the influence of Great Zimbabwe is not just a relic of the past. It's a living, breathing part of modern identity. The nation itself, Zimbabwe, takes its name from this very site. The Shona phrase, Jimbudza means great houses of stone. It's a declaration that the nation's roots are anchored in this incredible legacy. Look at the national flag of Zimbabwe, and you will see the iconic soapstone bird, a carving discovered among the ruins of the city. The walls that once guarded kings and protected the wealth of an empire now serve a different, perhaps even more important purpose. They guard memory itself. They protect the story of a great African civilization for all humanity. Walking through the ruins today is a profound experience. Archaeologists and poets, historians and tourists, all tread with a shared sense of reverence. The sheer scale of the great enclosure, with its high, curving walls built without a single drop of mortar, is humbling. Each stone seems to hold a question that science alone cannot fully answer. How did they organize such a massive labor force? What precise astronomical alignments were they observing? What ceremonies took place within these silent walls? But while our minds grapple with these mysteries, the heart seems to understand on a different level. You can feel the history here. You can sense the presence of the past, not as a ghost, but as a steady, enduring energy. When the wind sweeps across the plateau and whispers through the narrow passages of the ruins, it seems to carry a low, resonant hum. It's easy to imagine it as the same sound the masons heard centuries ago as they worked, a song of purpose and endurance. Great Zimbabwe remains one of Africa's most eloquent silences. It's a place that doesn't need to shout its importance. Its grandeur speaks for itself. Here, in this quiet valley, architecture and ancestry still hold hands. A physical link between the past and the present, a bridge across centuries. Visit on a clear night, when the moon is high in the African sky, and you might witness something magical. The granite stones seem to acquire a soft, internal glow. It's not just a reflection of the moonlight. It feels deeper, like a light of remembrance emanating from within. It's as if the stones themselves are whispering to those patient enough to listen. Their message is simple and profound. We are the proof. We are the proof that greatness does not need to shout. It does not need to boast. It simply endures. And perhaps that is the truest, most powerful legacy of Great Zimbabwe. It's not just about the gold, the trade, or the power of its kings. It's about the quiet strength of endurance. Long after the builders have gone, long after their names have been forgotten, and long after the empire itself has passed into history, the walls continue their watch. Serene, unbroken, and magnificent, they stand beneath the eternal African sky, a timeless monument to the genius and resilience of a people. The night has deepened. Here, the stars above Great Zimbabwe hang still, like silent witnesses to all that has passed: kings and cattle, trade and pride, song and silence. Beneath their infinite gaze, this city of stone breathes quietly. Its walls hold not just the weight of granite, but the very weight of memory itself. You have walked the paths where builders once carried stones upon their backs, their muscles straining with purpose. You have stood at the foot of towers that touch both sky and spirit, marveling at their scale and grace. You have listened for the ancient rhythm of chisels and drums that once echoed through this valley, a sound that blended human labor with divine intention. And now, as the night folds its soft, dark wings over the ruins, we return to stillness, to reflection, to that sacred quiet found only beneath a baobab's shade. Every civilization leaves behind a language of silence. Ancient Egypt carved its elaborate story in hieroglyphs. The Mali Empire wrote its legacy in manuscripts of gold. But Great Zimbabwe chose stone patient, enduring, wordless stone. It speaks not through ink or parchment, but through the profound language of form, through the way shadow meets light along its magnificent curves. Its message is not shouted from the heavens, but whispered on the wind. And if you listen long enough, you might just hear that whisper carried softly between the walls. It is a voice that says, "We were here, we dreamed, we built, we remembered." The story of Great Zimbabwe is not merely a tale of powerful kings and wealthy traders. It is a story of vision, of what it means for a people to see beauty and order in the world, and to mirror it back through their own hands. These stones were never just walls. They were a map of belief, a physical manifestation of a spiritual worldview. Every curve, every chamber, every towering structure was a gesture toward the divine. The builders did not separate their craft from their spirit. For them, shaping stone was a form of prayer, an act of communion. In that way, Great Zimbabwe still stands, not as a ruin, but as a sermon, one carved in eternal silence. It tells us that African genius has never needed outside validation, that African architecture has always understood balance and grace on its own terms. It reminds us that the ancestors measured time not in fleeting years, but in enduring purpose. To build was to belong, and to belong was to honor life itself. When travelers from distant lands first arrived and saw these sprawling ruins, they could not believe that Africans had built them. Their own biases blinded them to the truth. They searched for foreign hands, for lost European kingdoms, for fantastical myths to explain what stood plainly before their eyes. But the stones were patient. They did not shout their origins or defend themselves. They simply endured, weathering centuries of doubt, waiting for the day when their truth would rise again like the morning sun. And so it did. Today, the name Zimbabwe lives on not as a ghost of a forgotten past, but as a modern nation's heartbeat. The very walls that once guarded a royal court now guard an entire people's pride. Each block, each curve, each faint echo still whispers a powerful truth. We are the descendants of builders. We are the children of those who shaped the earth and made it sing. As you drift deeper into rest, allow your mind to journey back. Imagine the night here long ago. Torches would have been flickering on the hill complex, casting dancing shadows. Cattle would be settling in their sturdy pens, their soft, blowing a gentle sound in the cool air. Women would be humming lullabies near the fire, their voices a thread of comfort weaving through the darkness. The king would have already withdrawn to his private chamber, while guards kept a watchful eye over the valley below. Somewhere in the distance, a hyena's cry might have briefly broken the stillness, and the scent of coming rain would have carried across the vast plains. Life moved slowly, but it moved with a steady, dependable rhythm though even time itself bowed before the permanence of the stone. That rhythm is what we carry with us now through memory, through story, through the quiet patience of all who still believe in beauty that lasts. Great Zimbabwe is not lost to time. It lives wherever someone builds with care and intention. It lives wherever a child traces their small fingers across the old, weathered walls and feels a spark of wonder stir within them. It lives in every act of creation that honors what came before. So, as you rest, remember this. We are not so far from those who built with their bare hands. We are not separate from their dust, nor from their dreams. The very same stars that guided their nights are the ones that guide ours. The same wind that sang through their magnificent walls hums softly now through our windows. The same spirit that once commanded them to build still whispers to us to simply be. Beneath the great baobab of memory, everything connects. Let this be your final vision tonight. A city of stone resting peacefully beneath a velvet sky. Its towers silvered by moonlight, its silent walls breathing with the ghosts of music long faded. Let the rhythm of the past cradle your thoughts, and let the profound weight of history ease your heart. Because the story of Great Zimbabwe is also the story of endurance. It shows us how creation outlives decay, how truth outlasts lies, and how memory ultimately resists silence. It is a powerful reminder that even when all else falls away, the spirit of what we build with our hands, with love, with faith remains. And so, as you drift in that gentle space between waking and dream, know this: the stones still whisper, the ancestors still remember. And under this vast African sky, you are never forgotten. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If this story moved you, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more stories. Sleep well, you are now under baobab skies.